Hello student, welcome again to this class of business studies. Today we will learn about a new chapter, that is public, private and global enterprises. We know that India, on the verge of independence, it was having a backward economy. Now this backwardness was due to the state of industries, the state of agriculture and the state of societies as well. Industrially, we are backward because our product could not match up the product in the world market, in the global market. The technology that we were using, it was redundant. The industrial revolution that took place in England, that posed a challenge for our product. The product that were manufactured by such industries, they were of fine qualities and they were also cheaper in comparison to our goods. We faced a setback in the industrial fields. The society had a demography marked by people living below poverty line, or they were engraft in the vicious circle of poverty. The state of agriculture was very much dwindling and dilapidated. It was due to the small holdings, size of small holdings, as well as they had no access to the funds that is required for getting seeds, high quality seeds, or the funds which help them to buy agricultural equipments. The indigenous lenders of money, say sahukars and other forms of banking, they charge exorbitant interest. So what really happened, that the principal amount which was borrowed, it was never repaid. Whatever they repaid, it was towards the interest. So they created a vicious circle of poverty, and the state of the poor, they remained as it is. There was no effort made to assuage the sufferings of them. So this condition led India into a backward economy. There was no heavy industries or no basic industries which could make use of the natural bounty or natural resources that we were gifted with. And private entrepreneurs, they were not motivated because they felt that the gestation period of establishing heavy industries, it was too long and the return is very slow and low as well. So it is not worth waiting. And therefore, the private entrepreneurs, they did not feel motivated to do the work or to do setup of industries which would help India to achieve self-sufficiency, independence, and make a place in the global market. Besides promoting development and growth of Indian economy and Indian society. And hence, the government thought that laying down such basic infrastructure which could pave the way for industrial activities, commercial activities on a improved scale could be only financed and taken up by the government. And therefore, the government provided fund for such activities out of the public resources. And therefore, all such commercial activities and industrial activities that were organized out of the funds created for, or out of the fund created by public resources, belongs to this public sector enterprises. And therefore, we have pointed out that industrial and commercial enterprises, the capital of which, the infrastructure of which, and the content and control of management of which is financed or provided by the government. The government had a control of that. And then it was provided out of public resources. So this was the basic thing why public enterprises were preferred at the verge or on the verge of our economy achieving independence. This is the prime result. Then I have pointed out that we were basically an industrially backward state. We were economically not developed and socially poor state of Indian industry and agriculture. This was the Indian economic state, and therefore to set up an infrastructure, to set up an industrial base for the economy, which could led to the setting up of such industries that could make use of the raw material that we could use, that we produced during them, instead of exporting them or being taken up by foreign countries. If we could use them, then we would surely have a cheaper product, and we could market that product in a global market. This would lead us to the path of development and growth, because our foreign exchange, foreign revenue will increase. We would compete in the global market. And considering this, the government has played a pivotal role, and therefore this sector, what we refers to as an area of industrial and commercial enterprises, where finance and resources are provided by the government, they are in the hand of public. These sources or these sectors are referred to as public sectors. The resources of production are in the hand of the public, not in the hand of private entrepreneurs or private persons. And therefore, public enterprises, they played a dominant role. It has basically three objectives. That first of all, India should be at par in the global economy. It must develop the society. The product or the industrial activities of India should match to the activities of the world level. And with this view, there was dominant role that was given to these public sector enterprises. The rationale behind this is that we lacked large and small scale or basic industries in our country. And these industries, they need a huge investment in terms of equipments, tools, machine. The private entrepreneur, they were not motivated, as I have pointed out, because the gestation period, that is the period between financing of a project and actual starting up of the project, wherefrom the income starts generating, it is very, very longer. And overall, the return in such industries is very slow. And therefore, the government has to give a dominant role to the public sector enterprises. Then coming to optimum utilization of the resources. Now, since government would be having a control of the resources, it can be assured of better efficiency. It happens that due to paucity of the fund, lack of fund, either the equipments or machines or the other resources, they may not be processed properly. They may not be harnessed properly. And the government has a steady supply of proper funds, which will ensure the optimum utilization of the fund. None of the resources would be underutilized. They would be utilized to their maximum capacity due to supply of proper funds. There is no shortage or paucity of fund. Then there is removal of regional disparities. Most of the region in India, what happens? They were not developed or they were underdeveloped due to some industrial activities not being taken up in such places. So what happens? That some of the industries which were set up in regions, those regions were quite developed, but the regions which do have a bounty of natural resources, but there were no industrial activities. As such, those regions were not developed. Neither the natural resources were harnessed properly, they were not utilized, they were not extracted properly. There was underachievement in those areas. There were poor employment in those areas. Now, setting up of an industry in such area on a priority basis would help the government in setting up the pace for regional development, and then this would help us in doing away with the regional disparity. Then the fourth one was future growth. if India has to develop, then it has to think in terms of its global presence. It has to make a product which could be globally recognized. It could be depending on its own technology. And therefore, public sector played an important role to ensure that the surplus production that takes place, or if it is properly utilized, then the surplus investment which is left, that can be used for further growth, for future reinvestment in other projects as well. The government did not dependent on any other external management and control. These enterprises, they were controlled and managed by government authorities, and therefore there was greater accountability and efficiency. As a result, the surplus of production or surplus of resources, they could be used as a reinvestment, and this ensured a future growth as well. And then finally we have social objective. We know that creation or setting up of these public sector enterprises would help us in carrying out the welfare of the people in the society. We know that other regions were not properly developed. So this was taken out with the objective that since industries would be established or it would be set up in those areas on a priority basis, it would create an employment opportunities in the society. So with the objective that the standard of people in the society would improve by setting up of the industries in the public sector, the government played a dominant role, and a spectrum of industries were established or it were set up in this public sector enterprises, and therefore a dominant role was given to this public sector enterprises. There were many industries, right from petroleum, right from power projects, then we have construction of canals, we have construction of bridges and dams. So a lot of industries, heavy industries were set up. It was mainly taken with the view that such industries would pave the way for our social development. There was a social objective that how society would be improved, how the level of the people in the society would improve. So they provided that if this public sector plays a dominant role, then surely our country, our globe economy, it would improve. It would pave the way for development of this country. Our industrial state would change. We would be creating our own necessary equipments that were needed for development of other industries. We were having a lot of raw materials since we are agricultural based, and therefore we could harness the raw material properly. So overall around there would be a social development, and therefore a predominant role or a major pivotal role, proactive role was given to this public sector enterprises. Now, as regarding why this public sector were given, what is the objective behind this public sector enterprises? So the primary objective behind public sector enterprises was to accelerate the rate of economic development in a planned manner, and therefore 5-year plans were adopted so that on a priority basis the region as well as industries could be set up in a planned manner, in a primacy way. The industries which were needed primarily, they were first given preferences for setting up. So to accelerate the rate of this economic growth in a planned manner, this sector was given a predominant role. Then as regarding achieving self-reliance in the strategic sector, the sector which were necessary to promote Indian economy to the path of development and growth, those industries were given a primary role. Why? Because we wanted to achieve self-reliance in those strategic sectors. We would not be dependent on other economy, on the goods supplied by other countries. We would be self-dependent. And therefore, again, this public sector was given a greater importance. And we knew that the third one was that the infrastructure facilities that were required. So those infrastructure facilities for promoting a balanced and a diversified economic growth could be provided only by this out of public resources, out of government funds. And therefore, they provided a dominant role to this public sector enterprises. Even we have studied in the directive principle of state policies, what should be the policies of government that were laid down in the constitution. And therefore, with the aims and objectives of the directive principles, the public sector activities were organized. Then the fourth one was that in the society there was unequal distribution of wealth. It led to the concentration of wealth and economic power in the few hands. Establishing of this or setting up of these industrial activities by public sector would help to prevent the concentration of economic power and growth of monopolies. Setting up of industries would not only be the monopolies of government, so not only the monopolies of private entrepreneurs or those capitalists. It shifted from their hand to the government. The government taking a major role in a setting up of industries. So they can provide also employment. They can also lift up the standard of living. They can also provide goods to the society. So the monopoly will come to an end. And next one was that to reduce the regional imbalances and to increase employment. The public sector played a dominant role. Then the next objective was to generate and mobilize the surplus for reinvestment. I pointed out that there would be greater efficiency since there is an accountability of the use of the resources. The resources would be properly utilized, there would be no wastages. And therefore, the surplus of resources or surplus of the goods that we produced, they can be exported, they can be reinvested, and this would further help us in future growth. Therefore, the government also aimed at how future growth would be achieved by mobilizing the surplus for reinvestment. Then industries which were already existing, and if they were sick and not performing properly, the government would take up such takeover of the sick unit. That was also the objective. Another objective was to promote and protect the small scale enterprises. And we know how industrial activities affected our industries in terms of the goods, in terms of technology. Our indigenous industries, they suffered a most setback. The handicraft industries, because the goods were not preferred in terms of the goods that were manufactured by the industries in the foreign countries. Therefore, the government has thought this. And then the final objective of the government was to protect the consumers from the exploitation and excessive profiteering. Because private entrepreneurs' activities were guided by profit earning, whereas the activities of these public sector enterprises, they were guided by providing the cheaper and necessary goods, not for earning profit, but with the view of satisfying or with the view of social welfare. So these are all about the importance and objectives of public sector enterprises. We shall discuss further in our class. Till then, keep learning.